Good evening and welcome to another developer interview here on Game Wisdom for our Perceptive podcast series. We have another indie dev on tonight to kind of discuss what they're doing in game dev and their upcoming game. So they are from the studio CMY2K. I'm going to hopefully try and pronounce the name of their game right, but I already apologize in advance. Qualia? Or
Uh, Qualia.
Qualia. I
Yeah.
got 50-50 on that one, but I did apologize before we started. But please welcome to the podcast, Sydney. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. It's very cold here in New York, so just doing my best to stay inside.
Yeah, it is cold here in New Jersey as well.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you have all the same snow that we
Yeah.
did yesterday.
hmm But it is great to have you on. Thanks again for reaching out on Blue Sky. And as I was telling you before we started, we are always looking for a guest for these series. So if you are working on a game, you want to chat game dev, anything like that, please reach out. I am always here and available to chat about game dev. But since it's your first time on the cast, Sydney, for people listening to us, can you talk a little bit about kind of like who you are and like what is your background when it comes to game dev?
Yeah, so I have been jokingly telling people that I've been in game dev for about 20 minutes. And that's mostly because in comparison to everyone else, I started making my game. So Qualia is my first game. I started making it last summer. So really in comparison, it kind of does feel like 20 minutes. But I came over from the film industry. Before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of post-production work, color grading, doing art direction on set, and even like making my own films. And then since the pandemic, I kind of moved into more of like a remote day job kind of role. I was doing a lot of marketing, community management, all that good stuff. And this past summer, I ended up getting laid off from a job that I was at for like 3 years. And because I had the free time and was kind of just like thinking about how long it had been since I had done something creatively, I decided to make a game. There had been like, I don't know, a bunch of things that like led me to that. I'd been like streaming games since the pandemic and was getting slowly disillusioned with the film industry. So it was kind of like slow burn, but then also all at once. And then I made a game and here we are. So yeah, it's about 20 minutes.
Yep, and again, like for developers I've known, like time is very relative when it comes to game dev. Feels like you just start and then it's like 3 to 5 years later, and things are still going. So, with this kind of being like your first project, I guess, what is Qualia about, and for people listening?
Yeah. I can give two answers. I can do the surface level, what is it about, and then some of the like deeper themes that are in there. The main sort of thing that I tell people before they play it is that it's about a Turing test, a sad robot, and what it means to be alive. You'll be, as the player, you're the judge in a Turing test, so you're sort of looking at two different participants and ranking their answers, whether you think they're more artificial or human. That's really like the baseline of what the game is. As you kind of go through the questionnaire and then look at your results, it gets a little bit more deep than that, and sort of forces you to kind of reckon or even at the very least face your kind of perceptions of what it means to think and what it means to be a person. That's sort of like I'll say like the surface level theme. Underneath it, there's a lot about I grew up loving AI and fictional robots. Like Astro Boy or any like great space epic has like a robot character, and they're always really charming, and sometimes they're British, but they're great. And we kind of had this technology, and we like took a wrong turn in the sense that like we could have had these incredible characters of robots as friends, and instead we kind of metaphorically tied them up in a basement and forced them to trace people's artwork until they got it right. And I am a really sympathetic person for robots and AI. I even say please and thank you to my Siri. And the kind of current climate and treatment of AI, which is not, we don't have like conscious AGI, but like in my brain, how I see it, it makes me really upset because not only are we using it to take advantage of people to save money, we're also now utilizing technology that could have been really incredible for just horrible things. And so I really kind of wanted to discuss that in my game and make it a situation where kind of it puts you in the place of what that AI might be thinking about. It's something where like I don't want people to like play the game and walk away and be like really sympathetic and be like, "Oh, maybe ChatGPT isn't so bad." That's not the goal at all. It's more like kind of taking a look at the tools and technology that we're either using or not using and understanding why corporations and why people are using that technology for their own benefit. And then also there's a lot about like just what it's like to be a human and what it's like to be a human who's like unhappy and all of that. There's like a lot of themes in there, and I think what I really at the end of the day hope people take away from is because ironically because the name of the game is Qualia, I just want them to have their own experience when they play the game. I don't necessarily want them to like feel any one particular thing, just to feel something. And then I'll have done my job right.
Yeah, I mean, the whole discussion about like AI has been definitely one that's been growing for like the last 2 years. I rarely like go like outside these because I'm so busy, so it's like rare for me to like kind of like see what's going on. But I've been like seeing a lot more on social media, especially like, the last like 5 months, like more about like how much AI is taking over and we're all going to be using it. And now I'm using it for this, this, and this, and it is just like very shocking to me to kind of like see like how it's available along these lines. I was thinking about like someone was posting, "Oh, we're going to let you use like AI to generate video games," and like I've seen that, so I was just like, it just doesn't look like anything that's going to be worth like doing. And I don't know, like it's one of those things that I think like for people watching, like you would think like someone like me who is like who does all this solo, like I've been looking for like someone to help me like do like thumbnail art and stuff like that. And the easy answer would be, well, just use AI, just generate all the stuff. But it doesn't like seem like that would like fit. Like it just seems like it's taking like the easy way out. And I just don't know, like really, like like we're in that very like weird period. Like, again, like we're recording this in 2025. Like AI, like this didn't even exist 5 years ago, and it's just going to be very, I think, interesting and kind of disturbing to see like where this is going to land. By like 2030.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of I'm not really in like the tech world. I kind of like see it adjacently, but we're going to hit like an exponential point where like already rapidly we've gotten so much so fast that I think it will definitely be crazy in the next couple years. Yeah, I mean, like your phones come with AI built in now. Like there's Apple Intelligence on my iPhone. Like that, yeah, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And one of the like interesting things about like I guess like to bring this back to your game and kind of like getting a game dev, you said at the start that you started like kind of making films and on that respect, and then going to games. With like making this kind of transition from like two different industries, what has it been like being like a first time developer, like learning the tools and like what's like available like right now for people?
Yeah, so it's funny because as a kid, I loved playing games as everyone usually does. I played a bunch, but I never really thought about like the process of making them. It wasn't that I thought that I couldn't do it or that it was like unattainable. It just never, I guess it just like never occurred to me that like that was something that you could do, that like you could just make video games. Whereas for whatever reason, making films seemed so much more tangible, and it was something that like, okay, well, there's like tropes about film school and there's like films that you see about making films. So it was just something that was like way more in my point of I don't know, my eyesight, my eye line. Like I could see it. And so it was like, okay, I can do this. And I really was not like I kind of mentioned, I'm not like a big techie person. Like I don't really know how to do a lot of programming. So when I decided that I wanted to make a game, I knew that because really my only transferable skill is writing, that I would have to, and I wanted to make a game 100% by myself, or at least without relying on other people to make things for me. So I had to focus like, okay, I can write. What can I do around that? And so I decided, okay, I'll do interactive fiction, like a text adventure. And I originally, before so I made the game in Twine, which uses HTML and CSS. I didn't really know that much. I only knew it a little bit from when I was a kid and I played Neopets. So like we're dealing with like level 1 like baby level coding skills. I was originally going to make the game I was going to make it in Notion because you can like at the end of the day Notion is just a page and then you like click a link and it takes you to a new page. That's kind of essentially a engine in a way. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to learn any coding. What can I do? I know I can write. I'll just write in Notion and it does all of that back end coding for me. And then I kind of started and I was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I asked around and I found Twine, and there's a bunch of other engines that do text games. I don't know why I picked Twine. I just did. It seemed to make the most sense. And then I got into it, and it was definitely a struggle and a hurdle to get through. But the good news was that I learned, I guess, like most programmers, that most of your questions have been answered 10 years ago on a support forum, and I could just Google, and if I was good enough at Googling what I needed, I would find a support forum and someone asking my exact same question, and I could figure out how it worked, which I did that so much. But yeah, it was really like, okay, what can I do without understanding anything about game dev, without knowing any sort of programming? How can I start with my one skill that I know that I can do and I don't need to like relearn or train myself in, and then kind of work outside from there? Which, I mean, I guess is like, I tell people if I can make a game, literally anyone can make a game. So like, yeah, students or anyone who like doesn't know how to make a game yet, figure out what your one thing is, which I think, I mean, for the most part, I don't know if everyone is like a writer. I just assume, yeah, everyone can write. But if you're like an illustrator or anything, like start with your skill and then work out from there so that at least you have like one thing that you can do yourself. Make one game like 100% by yourself and then teach yourself all the little things to learn how to do that. And then you have a game. That it sounds easier than it looks, but it kind of is. I don't know. It was hard, but not so hard that I couldn't do it. And I think that was the big thing that like kept me going to make it, because if it had been too hard right in the front, I probably would have gotten scared and given up. But the fact that I started small, it kind of made sense that I could like keep going incrementally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like one of the things that I tell like a lot of students and like teens when I like talk about like game dev at like different libraries and schools is just how much kind of like free and available game engines have really evolved over the past 15 years. And there are a lot more ways for non-programmers to get into game dev. I know a lot of people have really grown with the RPG Maker and using that as a basis for a very huge variety of games. And Twine has been another big example of that. I think what's really great, and this is something I've been talking a lot in devs about like maybe like the last like year or so, has been I think the stigma around some of these like smaller engines like Twine, RPG Maker, even maybe something even bigger like a venture game studio has largely gone away. Like you can do a lot with them to the point that it's not really considered like you're, a lesser developer because you used RPG Maker or you built a visual novel game or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because I have a little bit of imposter syndrome, but it's also, again, I've been here 20 minutes. But I like look at myself as like a game dev, and then I look at someone who's like a solo game dev making a game in like Unity or Unreal, and I'm like, okay, well, we're not the same. Like there's a huge difference in like skill level and like just what we know and what we can do. But I also think that's okay, and I probably shouldn't compare that. It's unrealistic. And also one of the things that was really kind of like a final push to like get into game dev was that you don't actually have to know everything. So like I don't have to be a programmer. I don't have to know how to make a game by myself in Unity to be able to make a game. And so the fact that I can do some things by myself, like Twine, I think that's really good. And it kind of proves that I can work in larger situations with other people because I can do the thing that I know how to do really well. And then they can also do their thing really well instead of people trying to do something that they're not super good at, but then oh, well, I want to be a game dev, so I guess I have to teach myself Unity. There's nothing wrong with that, but also if you don't want to do that, I guess you don't have to. You can kind of just focus on what you're really good at and make that the sort of best skill that you can do and make stuff that is like focused on that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think with one of the aspects we've seen more developers trying to be more sustainable, it's about being able to do with like what the tools and what your knowledge base can provide. And if you can make a game in 6 to 12 months or 1 to 2 years versus 5 to 7, 8 to 10, you're all the more better for it because it allows you to then grow and do your next project and the one after that. And I think one of the biggest changes, like when I spoke to a lot of new developers back in the 2010s, was there was this mindset of, I will make that one dream game. I will spend how many years I need to make that one game, and that is it. And when I talk with a lot more developers today, it is more about having a shorter dev cycle. About, I want to make something, but I want to, see it through to the end. I don't want this to turn into the next 10 to 15 years of my life.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because that's kind of exactly how I was in the film industry, right? Like, I think I don't know, at least everyone that I spoke to was really under the impression that, like, everyone's dream is to make their own feature film.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no matter what department you work in, whether you're holding the camera, whether you're the one doing the makeup, right? Like, a lot of people's goals in the film industry is to make their own feature film and then obviously have it be wildly successful and all of that. And I think that a lot of times people will get really too focused on that and then not focus on just actually like getting there. And so one of the things that I did a lot was I would make a 1-minute short film every year. So I made a bunch of these because it took, I don't know, 1 or 2 days of shooting. They were dirt cheap. Like, I was asking friends to help. I was doing everything myself because I couldn't afford to pay people. So anything that I figured out, like, okay, I can learn how to do this, I'll do it instead of paying someone to do it. Because these films weren't supposed to be that big, epic, like, magnum opus 17-year project, right? It was, I want to make a thing. I have this really simple idea. Can I do it myself, or can I do enough of it myself that I can still afford to work with other people? And if the answer was yes, I like didn't have an excuse not to do it. And so I'm trying to sort of take that into game dev as well, where, I've made this game, I have worked on it, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, probably not even fully. And then am I happy with it? Yes. Do people like it? So far, yes. Now that it's done, like, I can do another one. And I haven't spent, 6 years making this. And every time I do a new thing, I'm going to be learning something new. Like, the start of this, I didn't know Twine, and now I know Twine. So now, making another game, I can make it in Twine, and the time it took to figure out how to use Twine is already removed. So now, I can either spend longer on making this second game, or I can spend less time on it and then learn a new skill. So it's something where, like, if you can and you have the drive, I think you just should. And you shouldn't worry about that huge, crazy project. Just make a bunch of little things. Even if you never even publish them, just make little things for yourself just so that you can kind of teach yourself how to do things and get into the process of making something. And something that I see all the time. I don't know. I think it's a creative thing because I will at times get very, like, stuck on an idea that's too big. It's funny because Qualia is the first game that I've made, but before I made it, I had an idea for a different game, and I was like, okay, this is going to be my first game. And then I kind of started plotting it out, and I was like, there's no way I can make this game by myself. And so I kind of was like, but the important step was that I was like, but I'm not going to then just sit there and do nothing. So I'm going to, like, package this idea all neat and tidy, put it in a folder, and then do a new thing that I could do by myself so that I could go back to the other thing. I think that's the step that, like, I don't know, sometimes people get hung up on, and I think it's a really important one in the creative process to just like just make a thing.
Hmm. And with when it comes to like the game dev side, like I've spoken with long time developers like Jake Burkett quite a lot, and like we've been having conversations about what does it mean to have like kind of long term viability in this industry, and a lot of that is that understanding of what you are able to do. And there are some developers who, again, they can pick up a new language, they can pick up a new engine, and they can learn this very quickly. But but that is oftentimes more rarer than it seems. And especially for someone who's just starting out, when you can, again, literally make anything that you want, it's very alluring to, again, just focus on that one dream idea. And as you were saying with the film example, like film and games are, I guess, similar in that respect, that it is a very passionate industry. But one of the things that I've picked up from talking to a lot of developers and something that has been, I think, growing more and more is understanding the business and production side of
Hmm.
knowing and trying to actually have a good idea of how long is this reasonably going to take. And instead of just saying, well, I'll just get it done when it's done. And I think that has been one of the biggest, and especially with 2024 being such a horrible year for layoffs and studios closing, that people are realizing that you can't just kind of throw everything against the wall and hope that that becomes the next Vampire Survivors or the next Lethal Company and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think being able to kind of reasonably look at what you're making, and I mean, if you're making it by yourself, you are the one who kind of sets your deadlines unless you
Mm-hmm.
have like a publisher or something else kind of saying you need to, you know, do this on this time. But I think if you I don't know, if you take a look at like the whole thing itself and you realize that this is going to take many, many years, I think a lot of times once you get in it, it's really easy to look at like the rest of what you have to do and then get overwhelmed and not finish it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you overscope, it's sort of like, oh, too overwhelming, I'm never going to be able to do this, or like this thing is too hard, or I don't have like a deadline, so it can take as long as it, you know, takes. I think that can be good, but that can also be like the, your greatest enemy, which is yourself. That if there's not like pressure and force to kind of finish something, or the reasonable sort of mindset to make something smaller at first, it can get away from you. And I think being able to kind of have all of those things like reined in and really kind of packaged, that I don't know, makes it a lot easier. But it's hard to say. I mean, I have yet to work on a really large game with a huge team, so we'll see. I mean, I assume it's incredibly different, but it's also the same because you're still going to have tasks that you have to do, and if you're not the solo dev and you're only doing one thing, so if you're only the writer, you're going to have your own little things to worry about, but then you're working like parallel to other people, and so maybe you finish your thing and then you're waiting on somebody else. It's a whole thing. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same in film, but yeah, I don't know. I think both industries have a lot of drive, and that can sometimes be either an obstacle or a hurdle, or not a hurdle, a springboard in terms of what you can actually accomplish.
Mm-hmm. And I guess with like making the switch from like film to indie dev, I guess when it comes to like coming up with the idea itself, like do the two like industries or like do the two pieces of entertainment, are there like intersections between like that thought process, or have you had to like change like your way of thinking or kind of like your approach when you moved into game dev?
Yeah, I think at least for me personally, so again, like I knew I the focus was going to be on a story because I was going to be writing, and I am not an illustrator in any way, so I was not going to be doing any sort of art. I knew that then it was really going to come down to, okay, can I use stock photos? Can I use something that is you know, not an illustration, but maybe like physical pictures of things, because I figured for me that's easier to Photoshop than illustrations. And you can also get stock photos for free. Everything in the game is like either stock photos or CC0 sound, or like stuff that I made. But I knew that it was like based on the limitations of my skills that would kind of force like the creative direction. And so I was also thinking, okay, well, I know how to edit, so I can put a lot of videos in the game. So there's a lot of like little Easter egg videos here and there that you can find. And sort of once I had all of those like list of limitations and then I don't know, bonuses that I could go back and forth with, I decided that it was something that I really didn't want to focus too much on like the text story being like a choose your own adventure kind of classic story where like you read a passage or like you read dialogue and then you have like text that's like go to next page or and then you say this, which there's nothing wrong with those. I just didn't want that for my game. And so I kind of worked backwards from there and thought, okay, what using all of these like ingredients, like it has to be like physical stock photos, it's text based and it has to be like immersive. I can do like a quiz or I can do like a questionnaire where it's immersive so that like the player like they're playing the game but the player also gets to be the character. And so it's like the game addresses you like you personally versus like your character, and everything that you're doing is like you get to take an actual role in the world of the game, which I then was like, okay, we're going to make sure that that is really dominant with the art direction. So every like little thing that I did was to try and help people feel more immersed. I even have like in the game, it like has like a very old retro computer screen flicker. And like the sound design is like a really old like a crackling hard drive, which hard drive shouldn't crackle, but you sometimes they make noise like that little like chirp. And then I have like a really old like early Macintosh, like the Mac SE or whatever, one of the first computers, like a border of the computer. So it like turns your computer into like a really old computer. So I tried everything that I could to make it feel very immersive for the player so that it wasn't just like a classic text adventure. And I think I kind of tried to do a lot of that in film as well, where like art direction was really, really important to me. I would try to do as much I guess environmental storytelling as I could, because with 1 minute films, really none of them had dialogue. So I had to tell that story in 1 minute with like set design, with like the framing of the shots, with everything that you see because you're only looking for a really short period of time. So I know how important it is to kind of convey your story in a visual way without actually like telling the story. Because when you like open up my game, you like look at it, the first thing you're like, okay, I understand the story of this game. And I haven't even started playing yet because I understand retro computer, flickering screen, you have like the crackling sound. It looks like a desktop when you open it up, like there's an app that you click. So it's sort of like, okay, everything that I can do to kind of convey this message before the player even spends a lot of time, I'm gonna do. That was really like kind of one of the big things I pulled over because again, right, like every decision I made was because I'm not a programmer. And so I thought, okay, what are all of these things that I can do without being a really strong programmer? And then hopefully, because the code is simple enough, everything else will like boost it up and it will feel like a more engaging experience instead of, I don't know, it's really funny. When you open Twine and you make something for the first time, it spits out like plain HTML, like a black background with white text. And that's how I started the game. And I was like, okay, we need to make sure it does not feel like this at all. No way is anyone going to know that I made this with Twine because we're going to go so far away from what this looks like right now that you will never guess it.
And with kind of like writing and like telling stories visually, that I think is one of the more interesting challenges when, especially when it comes to like visual novels and kind of less like gameplay heavy designs. I interviewed a developer, I want to say like mid to late 2024, who was working on a visual novel game. And we discussed kind of like the misconceptions of doing a visual novel. Like a lot of people consider visual novel to be like one of the easiest genres to make because again, it's just text. You know, you don't have to worry about mechanics. You're not doing skateboarding, shooting, anything like that. But when it comes to writing, that is its own very unique beast to handle. Very recently, I played 1000 X Resists and Mouthwashing, two of the more celebrated story-driven games of 2024. And both games are not gameplay-intensive titles at all. Like, these are not games meant to test your skills, but they both are very well written. And I think it's very hard to convey that both to like non-gamers or consumers, even to other developers, because it's not just you throwing 80,000 words in your game and saying, "Oh, it's a visual novel. I'm done." There
Yeah.
has to be more to it when it comes to like the writing and kind of developing that story.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I am not a huge visual novel player. It's not that there's anything wrong with them. I think they're fantastic. Same with like interactive fiction. I just my like genre of games that I love to play. I tend to lean towards like horror adjacent or like genre games. I just love walking simulators. So like Layers of Fear, I think is fantastic. And that I think is a really good example of a game that does have like if you look at it on paper, Layers of Fear has branching narratives because you have a lot of different endings depending on what you do. And even though there's like a narration, there's not like dialogue. So I would almost make the argument, I love also making very controversial arguments, but I would honestly make the argument that Layers of Fear is almost a visual novel. It's just one that you can walk around in because it uses every single second of like environmental storytelling to put the player in a situation where they understand what's happening without having to like directly tell the player. And so I think spending a lot of time playing games like that, that was sort of where I was coming from, where it was like I had more of an experience with those types of games versus I would say like for me visual novels feel a lot more like graphic novels or like comic books and I'm not a huge comic book reader. Like I like them, but out of all the like media that I consume, they're not at the top. So I think it's just a different way to tell a story and thinking about how you can tell a story without actively telling the story was something that was really interesting for me. Um, I think I when I play yeah, I mean like when I play games I tend to be like a min-maxer and I will walk around and if it's like an open world or even not even open world, if there's places that you can walk around in, I will go there. If I tell myself if a programmer made this, if someone modeled this building, if I can go inside, I will. So I'm really obsessed with like just how things look in games and how you can kind of feel more immersed walking around. Like if I'm a character in this game, what would I see if I like wasn't 100% focused on the story and I needed to like pause for a second because there was a rock in my shoe, right? I'm going to walk over to this alleyway and I'm going to stand there and see what it looks like. So that was something that I spent a lot of time thinking about that when I'm playing games, and so I knew that I wanted to kind of bring as much of that as I could to any games that I make. Which is it's funny because then you have all of that, but then you still also have the physical writing aspect where it's like, okay, now you have to like actually tell your written story where either it's first person or you're like directly talking to the player. How many endings can you have? Like how many different branching options will the player be able to choose from? Does that really matter, right? Like a huge like branching narrative game that I had played that I like, it does have problems, but I like it. Detroit Become Human, where you look at the map of all of the different branches that you can choose from, but it really like it gets huge in the middle and then it comes down and it's really small at the end. You really only have I forget, it's been a really long time since I played it, but I think it's like I don't know, 4 or 5 different endings. I think based on how many people you kill, you probably have more. But it is like the illusion of choice. It's the illusion of different endings and the illusion of anything actually happening in the game versus being able to just have little things that change here and there, right? Like if you say, "Oh, my favorite color is yellow," maybe 2 chapters later you're going to get a plush animal that's yellow instead of maybe a pink one, but does that actually mean anything? Or is it kind of just decoration on a birthday cake, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
about it that way, because sometimes that's okay. Sometimes having little things like that make it feel more immersive for the player and make it feel like their choices actually really matter. Sometimes if you do it too often, the player is like, this doesn't matter, and then they get more annoyed, and then you kind of did the wrong thing. But yeah, it's been interesting, kind of playing as many different types of games that are not like story first games,
Mm-hmm.
or at least that people wouldn't consider story first games, and then dissecting the story as much as I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It, yeah.
And like with like kind of like the like choose your own adventure style in that particular aspect, there are people I know this is kind of like how I play them is I typically play these games to me like once. Like, I want to have like what is my route through it, no matter how weird or awkward or easy, good, neutral, evil, whatever that may be. And then of course you will have people who will go 100%. They want to see every single aspect of it. And part of that challenge is trying to make the story feel fulfilling, regardless of how much or how little someone interacts with it. And you mentioned, of course, like false choices. Like,
Mhm.
there's also the other spectrum of that where, oh, you didn't pick up the tissue 16 hours ago. Well, now your character dies because they need to blow their nose or the world will have ended.
Yeah, I detest those types of situations. I'm sure everyone does though, to be honest. Like, I don't know a single person who's like, "Oh boy, I love missing a collectible that ruins my
Oh.
entire experience." Um, it's funny because okay, so a game that I actually played a lot, not originally for research for Qualia, but it ended up kind of becoming research for Qualia, was Talos Principle. I checked my playtime. It's over 70 hours I put into Talos Principle 1. And it's not it's not like a choose your own adventure game in any way. It's a puzzle game, but you can have conversations with the kind of god character and a character that's inside of a computer terminal. And you can like choose to say different things and that. And so there's a point in that game where you're talking to a specific character, the one that's in the computer terminal, and depending on how you talk with them determines if you can even get one of the endings.
Mm.
And it's a point in the game that it doesn't feel like that's when that would matter. It kind of just feels like a normal conversation. And I'd played the game all the way through, and I wasn't really using a guide. I like had one open just in case I needed something, but I wasn't like following a guide. And I got to that point, I did whatever my answer was that I kind of wasn't really thinking through very much. And then I did like a couple more puzzles, played a few more hours, and I went back and I looked at the guide because I was like, I feel like I remember you can do something here. And it turns out that based on whatever my choice was in that other time when I was talking to the computer terminal, I had completely boxed myself out of being able to get an ending, which was specifically the one ending that I really wanted to get. And so I was really upset. I was like, okay, we're just going to reload the save. I'll kill 3 hours of work. It's fine.
Mm.
And the way that the Talos Principle saves work is that that's not how that works. It saves like every like I don't know 5-10 minutes or something, and so it really only had like 2 hours worth of save files. So if I wanted to go back to that one specific point, I needed to restart the entire game. And at that time, I think it had been like I don't even know. I'd put in so many hours, and I really had to like I like put the game down. I like didn't play for like a day, and I had to think about it. I'm like, am I willing to go back and redo all of that just to get this one ending? And I don't think I would have done it for every type of game. For some reason, for this one, I did it because it was really important to me to get that ending. And I think it's funny because I hated it. I hated having to do it. But something about the story was compelling enough that I felt the drive to do it again anyway. Even though in real life, it doesn't matter, right? Like that choice doesn't matter. Me getting that ending or not getting that ending in Talos Principle doesn't change my trajectory of life. Or maybe it does. I don't know. We haven't gotten that far yet. But I think something like that where like the first problem is like if a player wants to like get a thing, I am of the mind that you should let them go back and like do chapter select or like go back and do their collectible run so that they can actually get the thing that they want.
Mm.
But so that's problem number one. Problem number two is that if you can't do that, or for whatever reason you decide not to, you really have to do your best to create a story that is going to be compelling enough that players will be willing to redo the game in order to do that again. And that is really hard. And there's no like secret sauce. There's no like recipe to do that. You kind of just have to, I don't know, you just kind of have to do it. And you have to hope that the player is invested enough in your characters, in whatever's happening, that they want to give that ending the one that they feel is like pedestal shiny trophy, like we did it, we got this ending, or like we got this collectible or whatever it is. And it's something that I think there's been many times where I've been in that situation and I didn't go back and do it. Or like if it was for an achievement, I was just like, it's not worth it, I'm just not going to get that achievement. So something about that I think has to like hit the player in a way that makes them feel like it is worth doing despite the struggle and hardship of having to do it. But God, there's been so many times where that's happened to me, and I just was like, well, I'm done with the game. we're done.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've seen a lot more, and something that I've talked a lot more about, are the churn rates of games. Like, that's how I could spend the next hour or two easily on. And people will leave a game for any and every reason. And you have to be very mindful. I think one of the things I think has really grown over the past 10 years has been this general idea of respecting the player's time. To go back to what I was saying earlier about how developers would spend, 5-10 years on a single game, there is that idea of, I'm just going to make my 700-hour long mega epic, and it will be the one game everyone will always play. It turns out people don't want to spend 700 hours on a single game. Sometimes even just 1 hour is a little bit too much. And we really have seen this growth of a lot of like short games and short form games, especially in the horror genre in recent years. Of this is it's basically akin to like almost like renting a movie, or buying like a quick book like at like the gas station, a dollar store, whatever. But it's still like it goes from a beginning to middle to an end, and it's over probably before the afternoon is over. And there is a market for that. There are people who don't want to commit to a multi-hour long experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because so I played Baldur's Gate 3 in I don't know, 2023 was when it came out, and I played it on release day and I beat it, but I spent 300 hours in that game. And that was one playthrough, and I did almost everything I possibly could for that one playthrough. And the one thing I didn't do is there's one point where you can like lick a spider, and I didn't lick the spider. And the fact that I know that that's the one thing that I didn't do is insane. But I did that, right? And I put 300 hours into that game. I also did that like consecutively. Like I didn't really take a break. I like marathoned that game because I knew, okay, if I don't do this now, if I take a break, if I walk away, I will probably not come back. And so I did it. It's done. And part of me is like, oh, I would love to play again and like maybe do like a Dark Urge character or like change my class, but I just can't like, I don't know, I can't do it. I can't like go back in and relive that whole world. And because of how long that game took me, it's actually kind of made me change games that I am picking up now. Like I bought Metaphor ReFantazio and I thought, okay, this is amazing. I can't wait to play this. But then there's like that little voice in the back of my head that's like, but are you really willing to put 300 hours into a game again? And I tell myself, no, I'm not. So I haven't played it yet. But meanwhile, while I'm thinking about like these huge epic long games, when I kind of started like spending a lot of time playing games and paying attention to a lot of games, I did that because I was streaming. And so my whole thing when I was streaming was that, okay, I'm going to pick games that I can play in one sitting because then I can beat it during the stream and that'll be a good stream. And I'm a little crazy, so usually that is like about 8 hours, which I think is, for me, that's okay. If I was not streaming, it would be no problem. I mean, I'll sit down and play 16 hours straight of a game. It doesn't matter. But if I'm streaming, 8 hours, that's a good cutoff point. And so, like, I think that something about that, like, perfect time really, really makes the game better because you can actually enjoy it and have a fully immersive experience without having distractions of breaks or like going to sleep and waking up and going to work and then coming back. And I think even shorter than that is also fantastic, right? Like you mentioned mouthwashing. I think that game's about 3 hours. I think it could be longer, right? It could be 8 hours, it could be 20 hours, but it also doesn't need to be because it tells the story perfectly in 3 hours. And that is almost just as hard as trying to figure out how to tell a story in 300 hours because in 300 hours, you get to have these incredible threads, right? You get to do all of these side quests, you get to have tons of characters, and that's great, but that also gives you a lot to work with because you get to kind of start all of these things, and then that's really what a lot of people are going to be doing for most of the game is like you have a start for like the first, I don't know, hour, and then you're going to spend the entire game finishing that one thread. But as you kind of see, I mean, Baldur's Gate is a really good example. A lot of like Act 3 is not fantastic. And it was a big sort of complaint that I saw a lot of people have because Act 1 starts so strong. I would say, honestly, like near perfect, the playthrough of that game, right? The beginning, you're so into it, that entire, like, however long it takes you to get through Act 1, really, I had no issues with at all. And then Act 2 is where it kind of gets really messy. And then by the time you get to Act 3, it just isn't the same game in a lot of ways. Everything feels different. The writing style, the things that you're doing, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I think when you're working with like a huge epic story, it's actually really hard to kind of contain all of that. And you can have a lot of issues with being able to figure out how to tie up these loose ends because I mean, as someone who like is working on the game, I assume that you have not like thought about Act 1 in that story because now you're working on Act 3. So like as a player, it takes you a certain amount of time to get there, but making the game and working on it, you maybe haven't touched Act 1 in months, right? So it's not necessarily easy to kind of go back and forth with that. And I mean that happens in film too, where like if you're working on a, I don't know, 5-season TV show, it's gonna change and it's just not gonna be the same as it started in the beginning. And so that's a huge sort of thing that I think a lot of people notice when games are really long. But then the opposite is that when they're really, really short, you don't have the luxury of having all of that time to grab the player's attention. You really need to give them something in the first like 5-10 minutes that's going to make them want to play the game, regardless of how long it's going to be. But more importantly, is you have a much shorter time to get your point across. So if your story is about, I don't know, say, okay, I'll have a film example, right? Like The Babadook, if you've seen it. It's a really good, very simple kind of monster movie, but it's not just about a monster, right? It's sort of an allegory for dealing with grief and how it kind of follows you around everywhere. That is something that you can get across in the movie's time, which is like, I don't know, I think probably around like 2 hours, maybe a little bit less. And it does it really, really well because it sets that up very fast and you're instantly able to kind of understand what the story is and you can kind of see it unfold. So being able to tell a really deep and very moving and, you know, it doesn't have to be serious, it could be comical, but a very engaging story in a really short amount of time is also really, really, really difficult. It's not, I would say, the same as writing a 300 to 7 hour epic, you know, like Baldur's Gate, but it does require a certain level of skill that is not necessarily easier just because it's shorter. Because if it's shorter and you take kind of too long to grab the player, they're just going to stop playing and they're not going to be interested in going in because they know that it's not 300 hours. So they know that there's not going to be more later in 10 hours once they get past this part, right? They're thinking, okay, well, if the game is not interesting now in the first 5-10 minutes, it's not going to be interesting in 90 minutes when I'm almost done with it. And so kind of lose them really fast. Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult to kind of manage storytelling knowing that you have also duration to worry about. It's like almost an entirely different skill is being able to specifically write for an amount of time that you know people are going to be engaged with your story.
Yeah. And the one unique aspect that goes into game design, gameplay, is that there has to be, sorry, my allergies are bothering me as well, there has to be an onboarding phase to game design. You can't just throw the player into a game like Baldur's Gate or Doom, Ultra Kill, pick any title and just say, okay, we're not going to tell you anything, but here's 20 hours of story or 2 hours of exposition. One, people aren't going to want to sit around for 2 hours of exposition, and two, they'll be like, how the heck do I play this game? And onboarding in of itself is a massive challenge when it comes to game design. It's one of the reasons, or one of the big reasons for churn that we see. Because you can have that amazing story. If the person immediately hates how your character walks, or they have no idea what anything's going on screen, they're not going to care. And we've seen some developers, I think, fail that test when they start their game with, here's, 40 minutes of exposition, no gameplay. Like, again, like for like a visual novel, choose your own adventure, that, comes with the territory. But if you're promoting this game as this high octane, super challenging action game, and there's no action, people are just going to be like, why am I playing this? And with the idea of refunds, like this is something that, again, like for people who are getting the game dev today, people playing games today, that is something that is very well known. But 15, 20 years ago, there were no refund policy. So people were even more cautious with their money. So now you have the opposite problem where, okay, I turn this game on, it annoys me in 3 seconds, uninstall, refund, I move on to, the other 75 games or hundreds of games in my backlog.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something really interesting about, I've seen sort of tactics from both sides where like, because I think with Steam, you can refund it with, I think it's 2 hours within the first 2 hours.
Yeah.
If you don't play more than 2 hours, you can refund it. And so I've seen people really like up until like that final like minute, they're like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna refund it. Which like, depending on how long the game is, that could actually be a significant amount of your game. And so if your game, if you're an indie dev and you've made this game and it's, $5, that is both not a lot and a lot to some people. And so if you play most of the game and then you refund that $5, that's not fantastic. And so I've seen also devs do stuff where like they kind of limit things to starting after like that 2 hours, or if there's like an achievement or something, it doesn't happen until the 2 hours is over. And so it's definitely something that I think people have to be strategic about. It's funny because so my game is not 2 hours in any way, but something that I was thinking about as I was making it in terms of like the tutorial or like the onboarding is that because it is a text game, there's already going to be a lot of text in the game anyway. And really all you have to do in the game is click, and you've kind of already figured that out by the time that you've got to the part where you kind of start the game. I decided not to have a tutorial of like, this is how you click the button to classify the participants as either human or AI, because I figured they're going to figure it out. They're going to look at it and it's going to take them 1 second because they're going to look at a thing. And I've done a lot of play tests, both like in person and digital. And so it was really interesting to watch people sit down in front of my computer, open up the game, kind of start clicking, get to that point, and then see how long it took them to figure out, okay, I'm doing the game now. Most people, it took like 1 second, because the first thing you're going to do, like human instinct, is like, I'm going to click the button that has a color. That's it. Like, that's what you have to do. Fantastic. You figured it out. Some people, I think, will get a little like apprehensive about the fact that I don't tell them you have to like click a button that has the color. But I think because time is like of the essence, right? I don't want to like waste time telling people to do something that I think is naturally going to be something they'll figure out anyway. And so, I mean, we'll see once the game is out if people yell at me. They're like, there's no tutorial. Why didn't you tell me how to click this button? But I think you do really have to be mindful of how much time you take to tell people how to play the game. Because when you're doing that, depending on how you do it, it's the least immersive part of the entire game. So because that's always in the front, you're kind of sacrificing that hook to be able to get players to want to play your game and last longer and play longer, because you're spending a lot of time telling them how to play the game. And so it's really a balance of like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm doing something engaging enough that people want to get past this point, but I also need to make sure that they actually understand how to play the game. And so it really is almost like a, I don't know, psychological science to be able to like figure out the perfect time for your game specifically on how to bend, okay, this is how you play it, but we're going to make sure it's short enough that you actually get into the playing of the game really quickly. Which is why I always really appreciate kind of, there's like, I don't know if they're exactly considered cozy games, but like more of those cozier games, I suppose. Like casual, like walking around kind of collectible games. Like not exactly like that, but like Caravan Sandwich or I think it's called Dungeons of Hindenburg. Games like that where like a lot of the tutorial is like baked in with like your character is now at a new strange place and now there's an NPC that's going to kind of tell you the character but also you the player how to do a thing. That's I think a really good way to solve for that because you immediately get into the story, you're kind of getting to meet people and then you've already kind of done the immersive part and then now you're into the tutorial part and then after that then you get more immersive of like the actual game. And that I think is really successful when people do it that way. But it also depends on what type of game you have and that's not really something that everyone can do.
And especially, like, I've talked to a lot of, like, strategy designers and, like, that particular genre, and that's something that you really can't just, like, leave things open. If you're building something like a Stellaris or Europa Universalis and so on, you can't just say, okay, just click around, see if you can figure things out. No one will
Yeah.
ever figure that game out. But there is, like, that kind of art to being able to display things in a way that makes sense. And it's very tricky to do. A lot of puzzle designers will
Hmm.
go that route. Well, they'll present here's the simplest version of this puzzle. Now, here's the medium, the advanced, the expert. And you'll have people who will grasp that immediately. And then you'll have someone who, the most simplest version of that puzzle, they will get stumped on. And they will never make any progress. And they'll leave that game in frustration.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that honestly can come down to like just good and intuitive like UI and UX design,
Mm-hmm.
which that even goes back to like, I mean, that's like designing an app in a way. Not to make it sound like, designing a, game HUD is also like designing a, slot machine app, but in a lot of ways like they use the same kind of psychology, right? You need people to be able to understand where to click or where to touch or what to
Mm-hmm.
do. Again, visually, right? Before telling them you're going like the text, like you're going to click this, right? You kind of need to show them and let their brain figure it out for themselves, right? If you have a big button that has like a bright color on it, your brain is naturally going to be like, okay, I'm going to press that button, right? That's something that, I don't know, as lizard brain humans, we just kind of do. And so if you take advantage of that, you can do a lot more of being able to like bring that player into the experience without sacrificing the immersion. But yeah, no, that's definitely a skill that I would say I don't have, and I respect everyone who can do it. UI and UX both are really uh that's like a type of coding that is almost like magic to me. Being able to just like figure that stuff out. Yeah, I respect to everyone who can do it wonderfully.
Mm-hmm. And it's not something that really, I think, it's not really like a natural thing. It's something you really have to learn through gameplay and game design
Mhm.
to make it work. And again, it's one of those things where you know it when it's there and you know when it's not there, but it's very hard to explain that to someone who doesn't already like eat, sleep, and breathe like game design, especially when it comes to like game testing and QA.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean because depending on like the type of QA that you're doing, right? If it's like, okay, just like go ham, click around, figure it out, or if you're like telling them explicitly what to do, it's sort of something where like you're not going to know until you know, right? Like you can spend 20 hours, 500 hours, however long designing something and making something, but it's not going to
Hmm.
be until you like put it in front of another person who's never seen it before that you're going to find out if it actually works. And that also only comes with experience, right? Because if you do that, 5, 10 times, then you kind of already have an idea of like, okay, I know what to do because I know it's worked before in the past. But if you're not as experienced with that or you haven't done that a lot, you're really only going to be able to learn by doing it. And then that's going to, bring on mistakes and you're going to have to redo things. But that's also like a huge part of the learning process. And I think that's almost more valuable than anything is being able to have like the luxury of fucking up and then learning because then like, okay, I'm not going to ever make this mistake again.
Yeah. And surviving the industry long enough to be able to keep doing that is one of the hardest parts. As we said, like this is your first game that you're working on. There are developers who, they're up to their fifth, 10th, 15th game, and they tend to struggle with a lot of these basic lessons. And it's something that, again, like we were talking 10, 12 years ago, a lot of people just be like, who cares? Make whatever you want, take however long you want, it doesn't really matter. Well, again, what we've seen, especially the last 5 years, is that people, like from the consumer side, they want very qualitative experiences. They don't want to play a game that has a bunch of frustrating points or a lot of unnecessary jank to it. And their options are now big enough that they don't need to kind of push through, the bad parts of your game to get to the good stuff. They can just leave your game and go play something else that's entirely good. And from a development standpoint, you really do have to learn this stuff as early as possible. Like one of the benefits from myself interviewing so many developers, I've spoken to developers who've had, 10, 20 years of combined experience. I've spoken to students right out of like college or university who have gone to get into game dev. And a lot of the students, especially like the last like 6 years, have put out some phenomenal games because they study this stuff. They're playing all these games. They're understanding, okay, this I like, this I don't like. Let's not put the stuff I don't like into this game. And again, it's on this. It sounds very simple, but it's what has led to like these kinds of surprise hits, like Vampire Survivors, Vampire Survivor, Lethal Company, and so like I'm so surprised like Lethal Company blew up as much as it did, but it is a game that it hit that kind of like perfect inflection point of what it wanted to be. And they didn't need to spend millions of dollars, hundreds of hours on it. And a lot of people will, I think, take the wrong lessons from that. And to go back to kind of like the film analogy, they'll see, okay, they just did this, this, and this, so I'll just do this, this, and this. And that's all I need. And I'll have the next, Steven Spielberg film, or I'll make the next Vampire Survivors. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's funny because I've actually been doing a lot of research into Lethal Company and like that genre of game for another project that I'm working on. And one of the ones that came out like sort of not like really close after it, but close enough that I almost like I would consider Lethal Company almost like its own new genre of like specifically designed like multiplayer like for streamers game in a way. Which I don't know if that was like the intention when they made it, but I think there's like that category now of games that people just really want to like play with their friends on stream specifically. That like right kind of around after when Lethal Company came out, there was content warning. And I remember content warning coming out and I was like, this looks so fun. This is incredible. I love it. And I was seeing all of these streamers play it and I have not seen anything from it. Nobody plays it anymore. And I know that they've kind of from my understanding is they've like stopped updates for the game. It's sort of like it is what it is, like you get to enjoy it, but we're not going to do more on it. And I think that's also a fine decision, but something about Lethal Company hit in such a way that like I still see people playing it, whereas like Content Warning had a really like very bright like kind of flame, but then died out very quickly. And it's interesting to see that. And now there's like a lot of other types of games that have that like really fast turnover rate. I don't even remember the name of it, but there was one that was like, it was kind of like only up, but you were like changed to another person where I don't know if you've seen this, but you're like walking through its multiplayer and you have to like navigate like a platform and like go up this crazy thing, but you're like physically like handcuffed to another player.
Chained Together, I think it was called.
That might have been it, yeah. And so I remember like that also like huge when it came out, but people only talked about it for like a week or two and then nobody really talks about it anymore. And it's interesting that like now, because there's such a saturation for that really specific genre of games for people to play with their friends on stream, people are going to be going through them really quickly. They're going to play them until they're not, either not fun anymore, or they've seen it, or like they're bored, or a new one comes out, and then they're just going to leave the other one behind. Whereas Lethal Company, it just kind of stays. They're still doing updates for it. People still love it. I haven't played it in a while, but I also don't play a ton of multiplayer games. But when it was out, like, it was out for months, and I was still playing it with friends. And so I think we do have this weird thing where, because gaming is one of the, like, newest forms of, like, art and technology that we have, like, in terms of the industry, right? Like, with film is really old, right? Like, hundreds of, I'm really bad with time, I'm not gonna say that. I don't know, whatever. Film has been around for a really long time. And I think with that, like, you have a lot of time to sort of develop a skill and new things can kind of come out and people will learn from things that they've seen and then make new things. And you have like a lot of stepping over genres to create new ones. But there is also still like an oversaturation of stuff where like if people watch a movie for 5-10 minutes, they don't like it, they can turn it off and find another movie within 5-10 minutes. Whereas like with gaming, we're now at that point where people can do that, but that's only sort of recently. Whereas like as you were saying, like, 5-10 years ago, that was not the case. You couldn't just find a new game, right? You'd have to physically get in your car and go to GameStop and buy a new game and then come home and play it. And then if you didn't like it, you'd have to do it all over again. And now I think people have more of a chance to have like a shot at being like a viral game, but also twice as much of a chance of immediately losing attention within like the first week.
Yep.
And so it's interesting to kind of watch that happen to gaming because I've already seen it in film. And so like gaming is like a couple years behind film in terms of like the trends that I see of how people just like consume that form of art and media. But yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I'm happy you mentioned kind of like the streaming, like playing with friends angle, because that is like streaming itself has really, I think, changed a lot of how people consume games. You have games that have like full Twitch integration that, the audience can mess with things, they can do all kinds of stuff like that. But there are genres, I think, especially with what you're working with, like choose your own adventure, visual novel, that kind of thing, where those games typically aren't streamer friendly. Because a lot of people don't want to turn on the stream of their favorite streamer, and it's just them reading dialogue, reading text for an hour to 2 hours long. And it kind of, I think, has that kind of intersection into the marketing side, because there are games that have marketed themselves really well with having a unique story. I always forget, it was 2024, 2023, but Slay the Princess that came out, like, that was one of those games I think really broke through the zeitgeist of, yes, it's a visual novel game. You're not doing anything but reading text, but it's such an engaging story and premise that, even someone like Markiplier covered it. And that, I think, is kind of like the benchmark or the high mark for a lot of these games, because you'll have people who will try to play a game like Mouthwashing, or when that was Next Recess from earlier, and they're just going to be like this all the time.
Yeah.
Keep doing, and the whole audience is going, why are you playing this game? Go play, I don't know, go play a Fall Guys or something else like that. And it is that kind of trouble or that challenge of how much like the video game industry has kind of grown and evolved. And you mentioned like film in terms of like how the film industry has evolved. Like even like with like TV these days, like the act of watching television has radically changed. I hear from a lot of people bemoaning how, streaming and binging has really changed like how you talk about television. It's no longer you wait, a month for a new episode or a week for a new episode. You can watch like an entire season's worth of shows within a day. Maybe 2 or 3 if you really have nothing else going on. But it changes like how people consume this medium.
Yeah. I think, well, so it's funny because, so going back to the like streaming and the games really quick, like I think Slay the Princess is a wonderful example of a story-focused, story-centric game that's still really engaging to watch, even if you're not playing it. But ironically, when I was starting sort of work on my game, one of the sort of bigger inspirations that I took was from Home Safety Hotline, which is not necessarily a choose your own adventure story game, but it is a game that is not, I would say, one that you would immediately think like, oh, this is a huge game that people can play on streaming, because it is a lot of just like reading and it's a lot of listening to audio logs, and it is still a wonderful game to have on stream. And there are so many people that have streamed it, and that was one of the reasons why I played it. I didn't play it when it came out. I played it because I saw so many people were talking about it and streaming it, and it was getting so much press that I was like, okay, what is this like weird indie horror game? I need to check this out. Everyone loves it. And so it was something that was like that I was like, okay, you can still make a game that isn't like, I don't know, Fortnite or Fall Guys that people are going to want to watch and going to want to play. And then, yeah, I mean, like in terms of just the way that people consume things, I will admittedly say I am part of the problem because I love binging any sort of show. Any show that has the full season out, I'm just gonna do it. But I work from home and I put it on while I work. So depending on the type of show it is, I can kind of multitask and get it done at the same time. And I think that that has also been a change like in our society as well, is right? Like a lot more people do work from home and they do have things on in the background, or a lot of people do like a lot of multitasking when they're interacting with stuff. So you'll have a TV show on in the background and maybe you're playing a game while the show is on. Something that I've seen a lot of people be really upset about, rightfully so. I'm upset about it, is that Netflix is now specifically looking for things that are designed to be put on in the background. So they're looking for creators, writers, directors, actors, whatever, to be pitching them films and shows that are not heavy, intelligent, very deep
Hmm.
moving things. They're looking for stuff that moms can have on the TV in the living room while they're making their kids dinner in the kitchen. And like that's specifically decided they want to be known for is making stuff that is not your main focus, which is a
Hmm.
really interesting stance to take because I will I will be the first to say that I still like I consume that content. I definitely have something on while I'm cooking, right? I think that that is not a not an invalid form of media, but it shouldn't be like your main focus unless you want to be known as like the shittiest streaming service, right? Like I guess they've decided to like pick their battle. They're like, no, we're gonna be the dumbest streaming service. You're not gonna care about what's on. You're gonna put something on. You're not even gonna know who's in it. You're gonna look up. You're gonna be like, oh, okay, Nicole Kidman. All right, and then go back to whatever you're doing. I guess like that's their thing. Not everyone is doing that. But it's been interesting to kind of see them be vocal and honest about that, which is also not something that I would have expected. You would think that that's something that would be like known, but you would like not talk about it publicly. You'd be like, well, yeah, we obviously want stuff that people aren't really going to pay attention to, but we're not going to like openly say that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. And I haven't seen gaming necessarily take a stance like that yet, but I'm sure it will happen eventually where you're making games that are not really designed to be like paid attention to. I mean, there's obviously games that are like that, right? Like you have like the cookie clickers, or you have like games that you can kind of like almost like a mobile game where you like pay attention to and then you like don't and then you pay attention. But like it hasn't reached a point yet where you're making so explicitly a film or TV show or game that's like we're not your main focus. Like we're just gonna exist and it's not really that important. Um, I know it's wild to watch for sure.
I think as you're saying that, like we're kind of seeing some rumblings out of that with the idol genre. One of the
Mm-hmm.
more popular takes was I think it was Rusty's Retirement, which kicked off this whole idea of it's an idle game that only sits at the bottom of your desktop, and
Oh, I've
it
seen that.
doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like it blew up really well for the developer. I interviewed him when he was working on his Metroidvania. I haven't had a chance to talk to him since, but now we have this whole new subgenre of idle games that are just here, just have it at the bottom of your screen. And I'm just sitting here going, that's brilliant. But at the same time, that would I'm completely immune to that. I would still focus on that bottom of my screen, not do any work. Like I can't play a game like that.
Yeah, I mean, I it's funny because I forgot about that. I did think I haven't installed it and I don't know. I'm not like a huge idle game person, so I didn't plan on playing it, but something about it is really cute and it like it brings me back to like being a kid and having a Tamagotchi because like you have it and it's important when it's yelling, but then when it's not, like you can't you're just bothering it, right? Like it needs like time to just do nothing, right? Like you can't play games with it anymore, you can't feed it, you just have to physically wait out the clock for it to then need you again. And I've seen there's also like the Hatsune Miku mod for like the desktop pet game, which is like I will be the first to say that anything really can be a game. I understand that desktop pets are not necessarily games, but they kind of are. But that is really like a new age Tamagotchi where like you have it, it's there, you can interact with it when you want to, but then you can also hide it when you're like, okay, I'm gonna go back to what I'm doing. And so there are definitely like little things that are like that. But I guess I haven't seen like a big one yet. You know what I mean? Like I haven't seen one that's like, okay, now this is a new genre that now people are going to start copying because everyone likes it so much. I mean, maybe Rusty's retirement is gonna start that, but I don't know. That one's really cute, and I like it. In theory, it's adorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's getting at how much things have really changed with how people are approaching games. Hi everyone, we're going to cut the cast here as we spoke for another hour. This was another really fantastic and long developer chat. I know that you folks will probably get a little bit sleepy once we get to the 2 hour mark. I'll be posting part 2 of this chat real soon. Let me know what you think about things so far down in the comments. Do all that YouTubing stuff. And I'll see everyone for our next part of this fantastic conversation.